Welcome to another episode list. It is not Victory Monday. It is Victory Tuesday. Jordan, it was an interesting Sunday. I know you were at a wedding. Very frustrating game to watch, but after taking the 24 hours and then starting to watch other stuff, I feel better than I did during the game. How are you feeling?
Well, I think that this is the type of league where you're even in games that you struggle, you're happy to get out of it with a win. So obviously, on a Tuesday, you need to feel good about yourself that you got out of there with a win. There are definitely a lot of things to clean up, and we'll talk about that. But again, you went into opening game, and as we preview Buffalo, I'll say again then, but I think there are parts of the playbook that we kind of kept close to the chest. I think there are parts of kind of what we're going to do that we kept close to our chest. And I think we almost used game one, from my eyes, as kind of a fourth preseason game, like a real full preseason game to kind of feel out your team. And we should just be grateful to get out with a win.
Yeah, and to that point, and I think Trent Green mentioned it during the broadcast, the Dolphins didn't really play any of their starters during the preseason, and I think you saw that a lot. I think offensively, the team looked sluggish. I thought Mostert looked sluggish. I don't want to say out of shape. I think that's a little unfair, but he looked sluggish. Tyreek looked off. With what happened to him before the game, I can understand why he looked off, and we can hit that elephant in the room real quick after this. But yeah, it just looked like a team that was struggling. And as I said, the Jaguars played their starters in the preseason and they looked like they were ready. But to say as well, the Bills didn't look good the first half. The Falcons-Pittsburgh Steelers game was very hard to watch. Bears were awful the first half. Just a lot of teams struggle because of the new preseason.
Yeah, I definitely think that you saw across the league, probably 80% of the league struggled to open the game. And it almost looked like, if you think about some teams that played guys in the preseason, you kind of saw those teams get off to early starts and go up early in games. You look at a team across the league like the Jaguars that played some of their guys, Jaguar, and it worked out for them, and they went off to an early start. So I think as you went into the second half of the game, you kind of saw the Dolphins ease into things, come out better. As Mike McDaniel said, and I'm usually at the home game, so it's not always that I listen to Mike McDaniel, but I think the exact words that he used were, "We need to do our football better." And I think that the Dolphins definitely did their football better in the second half in all three phases of the game.
I agree. Before we get into the game, like I said, got to address the elephant in the room. Tyreek Hill got cited. I think originally they said he was driving over 100, and then everything came out that he was 10 miles over the speed limit. They released the body camera footage. Jonnu Smith almost got cited. Calais Campbell did get handcuffs on as well. I don't want to get too political with everything. All I'm really going to say is, watching it, if you go to any other job that's customer service and someone gets belligerent, the people in customer service are expected to take it. Say yes, sir, no, sir, sorry, sir. But it feels like a lot of cops, and I am pro cops, so I don't want to get that, but a lot of these situations are cops going on power trips and just having a short fuse. When you're like, Jordan, you're a teacher. If one of your students started giving you lip, if you put your hands on them, you lose your job right away. So you just have to be, I think it's this case where you just have to be better. You just have to be the bigger man.
I think on both sides of it, you just have to be a bigger person. And we know a lot of what Tyreek said. I don't think we know 100% of what he said. And I'm going to stay out of this one. I'm not going to get political on this. And you're right. I mean, there's, in any sort of position on both sides, there's a certain way you need to handle yourself, and there's a certain authority you can give, but you can do it in a way that doesn't go over the top. I think there were definitely certain aspects of what the officers did that are wrong and are bad, and they should be disciplined for. And I don't think that ever needed to get to that point. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Not to make too much of an opinion.
Yeah, and like they said, the one thing they even said, Tyreek afterwards said to the cops, no hard feelings. So, and that way he was trying to be a bigger man. But yeah, rough way to start the day. And I do think it took a toll on the team a bit. I will say this too, is there were a lot of, and shout out to our friends of the show, uh, Ryder McConville, shout out to Eric Smith. I watched some of their reviews of the game. There were a lot of big plays that were left on the field. One thing everybody will talk about is Tua missing Tyreek. Looked like Ingold took the wrong man. Free free blitzer came. He rushed the throw. To throw Tua hits probably 10 times out of 10. But one that's kind of going unnoticed is one of the many screens we did to Jonnu Smith. Jonnu dropped it. If he would have caught that with his athleticism and the blocking in front of him, that's probably a touchdown. So that's arguably 14 points off the board right there.
Yeah, I think that as we talked about, the rust was there and there were points left on the board. But part of me was kind of underwhelmed with the play calling throughout the game. I thought there were a lot more screens than I expected to see, and they were a lot more east and west than I expected to see. A lot less north and south. So from that aspect, I was a little surprised, and I think that it made the few and far between shots they took kind of stand out more. I wonder if that was more them just trying to get into a rhythm, or if that's kind of a sign that of what we're going to see going forward. Try to gas them up or gas them down, as Mr. S just said. But I saw a lot less of a vertical game from the Dolphins than I was used to seeing last year. And from that aspect, I was a little surprised.
Yeah. During the game, I was underwhelmed, or I should say it this way. I didn't like the one play we kept doing is bring one of the tight ends, take your pick, or Ingold, motion behind and get them as the lead blocker. It's a good play on first or second down, but we started running that play behind the line of scrimmage a lot on third downs. And I'm like, okay, this defense is too quick. And I think that was part of the plan. Jaguars have a really good linebacking core. They have a really fast defensive line. And yes, Mr. S did say it was to bring them down. And I do agree with that. Normally you're used to running game, the body shots where it's just keep running up the middle, beat them up. We just tried to tire them out. And that probably had an effect on why we had more big plays in the second half. I think Tua ended up leading the NFL in big time throws for week one, or at least going into yesterday, he was leading the league with that with 4. So it was a strategy. It was one that was very frustrating to watch as a fan. But even with those moves, I think you saw the plays were still there. It was definitely different than we're used to and almost too stubborn. And yes, it did cost us, I think, too, in some ways.
Yeah, and I wanted to pull this up, and I think it's really useful information just to get a landscape as we talk about the offensive side of the ball. And a couple things that stand out for me when you look at the Pro Football Focus grades on this game. The first thing that stands out, obviously, is Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson. I think we can all say both of them played pretty clean games. I think Armstead had maybe one bad play.
And Jackson had
number.
Jackson's play was really bad.
And Jackson's play was really bad, but again, it was one bad play.
Yes.
As you look down, you got to give props to Liam there.
Again, one bad play.
One bad play, and I think that really stood out because it's him. So when he makes one bad play, there are a lot of issues. But that stands out. And the other number that stands out to me, if you look down a little bit, is Julian Hill's run blocking numbers. I think Durham Smythe really struggled in the game. As you see, he looks on here like he was our lowest rated offensive player. And I think that met the eye test.
Yeah.
But I think that the way Julian Hill played, you're going to see him, especially this week, in a game that I think we need to run the ball a lot, no matter who's in the backfield. I think you're going to see Julian Hill be on the field a lot because those running blocking numbers are so high.
Yeah. And Jordan, you know this. I say this all the time. PFF means nothing until it fits your narrative. So, but I will say this. Looking at this is a rare time seeing our ratings. I do think that the ratings do pass the eye test. I am not shocked to see Durham Smythe as our lowest rated offensive player. He noticeably was bad, and I do think it was noticeable that he got benched as well, because we saw a lot of the pooling plays we used to run with him. We saw Julian Hill take. Now, looking at these, and I thought Julian Hill was good, but to see Hill's pass blocking numbers, because as good as his run blocking was, his pass blocking was not good. That stood out too, because I do think that there were a few plays where Hill did miss his block. And the other thing, we all worry about Ike. We all worried about Ike throughout the offseason. We even worried about Brewer. I'm kind of surprised Brewer's rating is only a 70.2. I thought Aaron Brewer was really good. So to see him at a 72 seems low. But Robert Jones at a 54. I know some people rate him a little higher, but I thought Robert Jones was noticeably poor. He was getting a lot of holding calls. They were using him in the pool a lot, and he was just not getting enough of the blocks to help out. So it's one game, but I was pleasantly surprised with how the offensive line did against a really good defensive line. Now, also to say this, like, this isn't to say people overreacted, but there are stats out there to support either argument. Some advanced stats are saying Miami was top 5 in pass blocking wins, but then you also see stats that say Tua had the third least amount of time to throw the ball. So depending on what you're thinking or what you want to see, I should say, because pro negative, there's stats to back up either one.
So let me ask you this: when it comes to the stat about time to throw the ball, does that count how quickly he was getting the ball out on those screen plays that really didn't have anything to do with the offensive line? Or does that calculate only plays in which the offensive line was meant to block?
I just think it's any pass play.
Yeah, so I think that has something to do with it. I think it's a little harder to block or to hold your blocks for a long amount of time when it's a screen. So that takes the average of whatever 3 seconds down to a half a second.
Yep. I will also say this too. It was funny because, like, I know you were at the wedding, but watching the game, looking in Discord, every play in the first half, everybody's going, "Oh, the offensive line sucks. The offensive line sucks." Again, I'm not trying to say the offensive line is good, but watching the game, when we were down 17-0, there was not a point where I'm like, we're down because the offensive line isn't performing. The offensive line needs to get better at run blocking, but I also think there were at least 3 plays I saw where I think 2 with Mostert and 1 with HN, where a hole was there and they just missed the hole.
So I want to paint a picture for you because you said a couple times I was at a wedding. It was actually before the wedding. Okay. So this is what my Sunday looked like while my 2 brothers and their friends were at the game, sitting in my seat and getting a victory in my seat. I was sitting in the lobby of a Drury hotel. It was me, my grandfather, my father, and my stepmother behind one iPad, and my uncle and his girlfriend behind another iPad. And I had to continuously sync the iPads up with each other so that they were even. And every time it went off, it got unbalanced, and it happened a lot. At halftime of the game, I went up and showered during halftime, and then I watched the second half alone while getting dressed for the wedding, and having a little wine because the first half frustrated me.
Yeah, the first half was frustrating, and also, like I said, credit to the Jaguars. I got to try and say it right so you guys don't get mad at me.
Brett, wait, I want you to pause for a second. I want you to look in the private chat. We're going to go behind the bit a little bit. And I want you to pronounce the word that Mr. S posted in there that starts with a U.
So he was watching the game in Ushuaia and Ibiza.
How'd he do, Mr. S? Say it again, Brett.
Ushuaia.
Ushuaia? I was thinking more like a Ushuaia. Ashaya?
Ushuaia.
Okay, yeah, that probably makes more sense.
Enough.
Yeah,
but
you weren't close enough.
Yeah,
you weren't close at all.
Yeah, well, I was close in my own head, and that's all that matters.
All right.
Anyway,
so paint us the picture. Where were you watching the game?
Um, I was watching it at home. Yeah, Saturday was a rough college football week for me. I kind of knew it was going to happen. Um, and a very rare occurrence was I got very hungover. I was very hungover on Friday or Sunday because my friends told me I had to get drunk as I ever was, and I took them up on that. So my head was spinning during the game. Um, so I watched the first half, took a quick nap, and then came back to watch us look like a completely different team in the second half. But credit to Jacksonville. I'm going to get around having to say that. Um, but I thought they had a really good game plan to
For
start the
sure.
game. I was very confused by what they did the rest after the first half, but also credit to Anthony Weaver. I thought he made great adjustments.
Oh, Anthony Weaver made great adjustments, and I think that the next thing we're going to do is share the defensive Pro Football Focus. And as I pull that up there, credit to Anthony Weaver. I mean, he first of all made great adjustments, and second of all, you could tell that a big difference between this defense this year and the defense last year is this defense has a ton of energy, and they play with it throughout the game, and I think that showed, and I think that helped continuously stop the Jaguars in the second half, and come up in crucial situations like Javon Holland knocking that ball out of ETN's hand.
Yeah. Looking at these ratings, I'm just looking at them right now. Quentin Bell had one big play I remember. I didn't know he had
Yes.
as many snaps as he did. Jalen Phillips to me was the best player on the field.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He might have been, other than probably Tyreek, he might have been the best player in the game.
Yes. Benito Jones, I'll be honest, I didn't even know he played, so I can't even say like, okay, he was the lowest rated.
Well, all I know about Benito Jones is that there was twice during this first half that my grandfather yelped out that Jones guy is struggling.
Yeah, I didn't notice him. Cater, God love him, but
Yeah, Cater had a rough one, huh?
the big play, most of the big plays came against him. The completions came against him from the slot. Uh, I'm surprised Ramsey's so low, but he did have a rough first couple drives. Again, that's probably not playing. Jordan Brooks feels a little low. Kendall Fuller to note. Storm Duck, he didn't play a lot, but he had one play where he really, I think it was a play that Cater got benched, and he came in on had a great play and run support, but they only needed 1 yard. So Storm Duck definitely, I'm like, okay, Storm, he needs more snaps, I think.
It looks like Storm will be the guy if they do knock Cater out of the nickel position.
Mm-hmm.
I think Storm's the next guy up that'll get a look there.
Yeah, I will say this too, because a lot of people, he didn't show up on the stat sheet, but like I will say this, Chop Robinson, we knew he has a lot of work in the past and the against the rush, but there were 2 plays where he just destroyed Cam Robinson.
Yeah,
and he's unlucky not to have at least a sack in that game.
yeah. I think the problem with Chop was there was a series of run plays that they ran that he was making the same move off the edge multiple times in a row, and it seemed like the Jaguars just waited for that and kind of ran around it. He wasn't able to adjust. I think we know what he's going to be. He's going to be a situational pass rusher.
Yeah.
He only played 16 snaps, it looks like. I would say probably
he stood out just because he doesn't wear gloves. So he's like Connor Williams on defense. He doesn't wear gloves.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a guy you'll see him get a lot of pass rush opportunities. But we'll probably, as the season goes on and as we get to the playoffs, probably see him play less in early down situations.
Yeah. Aside from that, I actually think Calais Campbell, outside of his first sack, I think he had a rough game. So I'm actually shocked to see he was the second highest rated player. Just looking at that, I would have said Phillips 1, David Long 2, Holland 3, Deshaun Hand 4, and honestly, probably Jordan Brooks 5. Because I actually think Brooks popped out in a good way. Brooks and Long had one bad play where they both shot the same gap. Don't know whose fault it was because it looked like one started to twist and then stopped. But this is where I kind of I don't think the eye test really matches what I saw. Like Deshaun Hand, yeah, I think he looked fine, but I I didn't think he was like that highly rated.
Yeah, I think he just did his job, and I think that that's going to be kind of what we talked about before the season. That interior defensive line, all they got to do is be grown men and do their jobs.
Yeah.
They can't try to be heroes. They just got to be physical at the point of attack and let the playmakers we have around that make the plays and fill their gaps correctly. I don't think that. I think that was the idea behind letting Christian Wilkins go. That those guys are going to be asked to just simply play a role. And that's what we saw out of Anthony Weaver's defense last year in Baltimore, anyways. And I think that what we saw Sunday from the Dolphins defense was very reminiscent of that Baltimore defense.
Oh yeah, they definitely disguised a lot of coverages. Again, I will say for the 441 people watching us, if you don't subscribe or watch Ryder McConville, definitely give his videos a look. He has a very good breakdown that he released today of our defense and just how we hid coverages. There was one where we looked like we were, as he pointed out, looked like we were in cover 0, and it rotated into a cover 3, and someone came up late. Linebacker missed the tackle, and it ended up being a first down play. But the defense definitely is not a stubborn Vic Fangio defense. And I don't know if you watched the Eagles game on Friday, but they're already in against week 1. They have a lot of the complaints we did about Fangio last year already.
I mean, are you surprised? It's his defense, and they knew what they signed up for. So, I mean, he seems like the type of coach that is going to do it his way. And I think that there are organizations that works with, and we'll see how it is in Philly. But I think especially under this Mike McDaniel regime, having a guy like Anthony Weaver is a breath of fresh air and the perfect fit for what this football team is going to be this year and the identity that they're going to create.
Yeah. And yeah, I actually do think, and I'll be the first to admit, I thought we would destroy the Jaguars. It's very hard for me to say it that way, but they impressed me. I think I don't know if they'll win the division. I think Houston's probably the best team in that division, but I think they'll compete for a wild card. That defense, that front 7 is going to make life miserable for a lot of people. But man, their offensive play calling, that reminds me of an Adam Gase offense. I don't like, you just make one adjustment and they can't do anything.
Yeah. And I think that come December, January, that's not the type of offense that wins football games.
No. I was actually shocked that they went away from Tank Bigsby and they were trying to force ETN. ETN couldn't get anything going, and Bigsby was destroying us.
Yeah, and Bigsby ran with some force.
Yes.
I blame that on my brother, though, because in our family fantasy football league that we run as a group of guys in our family, we have Travis Etienne on the roster. Mm-hmm. And my brother said, and I quote 2 days before the season started, we don't need to draft Tank Bigsby with our last pick because even if Etienne gets hurt, Bigsby's not going to be better than the other guys we have. So I blame him, and 500 people now know that.
Yeah. Give me 1 second here.
You fixing the clarity?
Yep.
We'll use you fixing the clarity as a way to transition from talking about the Jaguars, as Brett likes to call them.
It's not that I like to call them. That's how it's pronounced in Pennsylvania.
And we are going to transition as Brett goes to a black screen and I take him off to talking about the Buffalo Bills and a Thursday night game. Fitting that we have the old logo in the background. Fitting that I have the old logo, the throwback logo on my hat. Brett, it is throwback week. Maybe if Mr. S is still awake, he can put our old throwback logo up on the socials. And we will be talking about Thursday night's finest. The Buffalo Bills come down to Miami for what will be a humid night because it has been raining here all week, Brett. Yep. It's actually been raining here for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, we need the rain. It hasn't rained for like all summer up here. But yeah, Mr. S, apologies. Yes, Javon Holland, game-winning play with that fumble, the peanut punch, as they call it, getting the fumble, fourth, and next play we have an 80-yard touchdown. I still do want to see Holland make more plays in the pass game with interceptions, but can't deny that when he comes up and runs support or in run support, he has a knack for getting those fumbles. As for the Bills, they also came back from behind. They looked really bad in the first half too, but it was the Josh Allen experience. You get a couple turnovers, a couple fumbles, and then a couple plays that, as much as we might hate him, only Josh Allen can make. But they don't have weapons right now. Like people say, oh, Keon Coleman made a couple plays. I didn't think he looked that good. It's Josh Allen's got to have that. Josh Allen's basically got to be Cam Newton from what was it, 2015 that he won the MVP. That's what he's got to do for the Bills. They don't have the guys. They really have to scheme people open. And now credit to Joe Brady, he did that in college. Can he do that in the pros? Remains to be seen. But it's still going to be a tough game. I don't think their offensive line is as good as it has been in the past, although they did just extend Spencer Brown. Their defense is beat up. It's bad to say, so I'm not going to say I'm happy about this, but I am not someone who's going to shed tears that Matt Milano's hurt. I will just put it that way. He is not one of my favorite players. I will put it that way. Their one corner, I think Johnson, they've already said is going to be out. So, but we might be down 2 running backs because both Mostert and our Achane were on the injury report as of today. I think we win. I think the team knows what they want to be a lot better this year than even last year. And I think McDaniel and Tua and really Tyreek and Waddle want to prove that they're tough. I saw on FS1, they're calling Miami Dolphins the breakdancers. They don't play football, we're breakdancers. And I think that is something that a lot of the players are resonating with. And I think they want to get the win. And above all else, I think Jordan Poyer and Sierra Neal want to get the win.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really emotional game. And I think that this game was definitely on the mind of the Dolphins when they played Jacksonville last week. And I think it was similar to your old college football look-ahead game where the Dolphins were really thinking about Buffalo, in the back of their minds prepping for Buffalo, and we're lucky to get out of a win versus Jacksonville. When I look at this Buffalo stat sheet, the one thing that stands out to me about the Bills in that game against the Cardinals, especially a game that Buffalo had to come back in, they were down at 17-3, ended up winning 34-28. The Bills ran the ball 33 times in the game and threw the ball 23 times, dropped back 25, threw 23, were sacked twice. I don't remember, and I would have to look back, but I would venture to guess that there are not a ton of times in the last couple of years in a game that looked like that the Bills ran the ball more than they threw the ball. And maybe that was what they saw against Arizona. But if I'm the Dolphins, I want them to have that same game plan. I don't see a way the Dolphins lose the game if Josh Allen attempts 23 passes in the game, if Josh Allen has 18 completions. But if they flip that, Josh Allen, we allow him to drop back, we allow him to have time in the pocket, he spaces us out and then is able to get on the run. That's what's going to keep them in games. As you said, Josh Allen's going to have an unbelievable season. And I think if the Bills are in a position to win the division at the end of the regular season, I think Josh Allen will probably be the front runner for MVP. But I don't think they have the same defensive talent that they had last year. I don't think that they have the same energy that they had last year. And I think that an early season primetime game in Miami, after the way last year ended, especially that week 17 game, week 18, game 17. I think that the Dolphins see Thursday night as a must-win game, as one could be early in the season. Because if you lose this game, you have some winnable games coming up, but this game sits in the back of your mind until the next time you play Buffalo.
It's essentially a 2-point swing, a 2-game swing.
For sure.
Yeah.
And in the NFL, a 2-game swing is a big game.
Yeah. I want to win. I always want to beat the Bills. I think the team needs to beat the Bills just to get I know we beat them not too long, like 2 years ago, but I think you need to get the boogeyman off your back. I think Greg Russo, he had, 3 sacks on against Arizona. Now, is that him just being a beast, or is it Arizona's offensive line just not being good? So this is a game I think is going to be a bit more of a test, because as good as Jacksonville's defensive line is, I feel like Buffalo's defensive line is a bit more physical, and I think that's where our interior tends to struggle more. So this is where, for all you, I'm just going to call you fans because it's the nicest, all you Eichenberg fans, this is going to be the first real test for him, because he's going up against people who are going to bull rush him nonstop. And Jordan, do you remember what Eichenberg had last year as a rating against the Bills?
It was quite low.
5. He was on skates. So I think he wants this game more than anything to show he's actually turning a corner. It's going to be close. I honestly do think that Miami is going to not give up, but go away from as many big plays to try and shorten games up. I think that may help with injuries. It may help with keeping everybody ready as the season goes on. But I think Miami wants to start winning tougher games, to get those gritty wins, get the grit. Not that we won't have big plays. That's never going to go away. When you have the speed we do, instant offense. But I think it's going to be maybe not the outside screens that we saw against Jacksonville, but I think you're going to see us try and play a smash mouth football game that you're not used to seeing us play. Also, because we only have we have 4 healthy receivers technically, and I'd probably say Barrios was maybe the one player that was worse than Durham Smythe on offense last week on Sunday. So I don't really have much trust for him, and I don't know if Dubois, however you say him, the guy we picked up from Green Bay, I don't think he's ready. DeBose? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Didn't know if that was like Dubois or whatever, but yeah, I don't know if he's ready for it. So we just don't have the receivers right now to run it, and unless you want to say, hey, we're gonna get Tanner Connor super involved in the game.
Yeah, I don't know. What I look at as keys, the first thing that stands out to me when you look at just simply looking at the Dolphins box score and then looking at the Bills box score, if you take the Arizona backfield, James Conner, Amari DeMarcado, and Trey Benson, the 3 of them combined had 6 catches for about 64 yards. Devon Achane had 7 catches for 76 yards. Mostert had 2 catches for 10 yards. I could see us, no matter who's in that backfield, as we talk, and Achane and Mostert haven't practiced to this point. But whether Achane plays, whether Mostert plays, or whether it's a heavy dose of Jeff Wilson and Jalen Wright, I think you're going to see a heavy dose of passes to the running back. And I think that's going to be a focus in this offense. And I think that a smash mouth play behind Alec Ingold, behind Julian Hill, and behind anybody that feels like showing up blocking, especially to the outside, is going to be what's in play for the Dolphins.
One thing to watch, in the All-22 film shows it, Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg in the run game, for as much as we struggled with the run, there's a lot of plays where they won. They were pushing their guys all the way back, and pulling guard missed a block, pulling tight end missed a block. I'm curious to see if they can do that against Buffalo, because if it is, the team loves to run to the right side, and Austin Jackson, for any struggle, is a great run blocker. So I think they're going to try and run behind him. I think we're going to try and get Jonnu Smith more involved in the passing game, because I don't think you can do it with Durham Smythe. So it's going to be interesting.
If the Dolphins are able to run the football, the Dolphins win the game.
Yes.
If the Dolphins are able, the Cardinals had 25 carries for 124 yards and a touchdown. if the Dolphins match what the Arizona Cardinals did on the ground, the Dolphins win the football game.
Also, shout out to Bailey for actually having good punts this past weekend.
Jake Bailey. I said in my group chat during the game, I said that we're currently on the Jake Bailey revenge tour. That man is here to prove all doubters wrong. He had some game, Jake Bailey did. Yeah. Shout out to him. I mean, we crushed him last year. We crushed him over the offseason. We crushed him. And we wanted some dude on the street to kick instead of Jake Bailey. And Jake Bailey came out, heard it, and played very well on Sunday. And let's hope he can keep it up Thursday night.
Yeah. No, hopefully. And I know a lot of people speak about special teams are going to destroy Sanders for missing that one field goal. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but his plant foot did slip when he went to kick it. So I'm not going to destroy him too much. I think that's just a Hard Rock issue and I think we're starting to see that a lot more, especially with a lot of these stadiums with college teams playing, and even with Copa America this summer, a lot of the fields have just been destroyed.
Yeah. Brett, I have a question for you. So we go back to late in the Jacksonville game. And this was something I saw in a couple places, and I thought it a little bit in the moment. But the Dolphins did something that I found to be really interesting, is that they let a lot of time run off towards the end of that game and elected to kick, what was it, a 52-yard field goal. Instead of running a couple more plays, they had the timeouts and trying to get somewhere in the 40-yard, maybe even 35-yard field goal range. They elected to run the ball a couple times, where we see a lot of teams in the NFL today throw the ball in those situations. What do you make of that?
I think it's one of those things the Dolphins have to learn to do it. I think I don't want to say it's a big amount of games because we have a winning record, 2 winning seasons with Mike McDaniel.
We are 1-0.
Yes, we are this year too. But I think the past 2 years, I think we've lost games where we know it. Mike McDaniel, for as great of a play designer as he is, as great of a play caller, he gets too cute sometimes. They pointed it out on the broadcast. Miami last year was the number 1 offense in the NFL, but the worst offense at 3rd and 1. So they get too cute. You try and put the ball in the air, and it costs you points. It costs you games. And I think this is them trying to show they're growing, because you can't, as much fun as you can't constantly do the up and down NASCAR offense all the time. Kansas City we all thought Kansas City was down last year, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl again. They realized it's not about what you look like all season. It's about being good at the right time. So I think this is just growing them, showing that, hey, we can do this, and just not giving Jacksonville the time. Or you end up in situations like, we don't want a situation where people are getting hurt when they don't need to be on the field.
Yeah, we need to take care of business, and we need to be a much more mature team this season.
I'll just remind everybody about the Titans game.
Yes. And I think that, and we've talked about this a million times, so I don't think this is the time to get into it again, but we really, that Titans game was the beginning of the end, or as we like to just call it, the end of the Dolphins season, because at that point, there was no expectation to win Baltimore. We were very flat and beaten up against Buffalo, and then in an impossible situation against Kansas City, playing literal guys off the street at defensive end on a hockey rink. So you can't expect to win that. The only thing you could do is learn from it, which it looked like early in that game against Jacksonville, late in that game against Jacksonville. We did seem to learn from it. We played a lot more grown-up physical football in my mind. Made a couple mistakes, but that's going to happen. It's week 1. And I look for us to just be in a better place at the end of, let's say, week 5, going into our bye week 6, than we are right now as a football team.
Yeah. Goal this year is to be playing better football in October than you played in September, better in November than you were in October, better in December than you were in November. Like I said, we want to be playing our best going into the playoffs, and I think we will. I'm going to go away from the Dolphins for a second. That being said, I still had a fun time watching Jets fans have panic attacks last night because they looked awful. And I've been saying I don't believe in the Jets hype even with Rodgers back. So I just got to say that was very entertaining to watch last night.
It's funny because, first of all, you have been saying for a while that the Jets worry you and don't impress you. They have some fundamental issues with that team. Now, they're going to play in some games where they can score some points. But they look like they could just get run over right now. If they don't give Hassan Reddick a deal, they're going to really struggle in the front seven on defense. And they're going to struggle to get the ball back. They're going to struggle in the time of possession department. And in the NFL, that is being able to stop the run is a recipe for absolute disaster if you can't do it. And right now, it looks like the Jets can't. And maybe it's just San Francisco is really good at it. Even if they don't have McCaffrey, it's a Shanahan offense, and that's what they do. So we'll see as they kind of move forward here. But what we saw from the Jets in week one was an issue, and I don't see it getting much better when they play a Tennessee team that has Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears and also is coming off a game that they feel like they should have won in week one.
Yeah. And something they talked about today on TV, and it's something I'll agree with, is you can talk about how good a team looks on paper, but you're only looking at the first 22 guys, 11 on offense, 11 on defense. A lot of people don't take the depth into consideration, and the Jets lost some good depth. They lost some good players because they went after Hassan Reddick, and he's not there. One of the reasons Kansas City, the main reason is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but one of the reasons Kansas City still ends up being good is they are consistently finding good starters, rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. San Francisco, they're finding good players on day 3 of the draft, undrafted. Running back last night was an undrafted rookie. We haven't had the picks since Mike McDaniel got here, but what have we gotten? Caterka, who had a rough game, but he contributed as an undrafted free agent. Looks like Storm Duck might be a find. Brandon Peely, found him. Good teams find good players late in the draft, and the Jets aren't doing that. Now, it also doesn't help that you have Nathaniel Hackett as your offensive coordinator. But let me ask you this. Would you rather have Nathaniel Hackett as your offensive coordinator or go back to Studgeville and Godsey?
I think I'm going to pick Nathaniel Hackett just simply because he's one guy, and I know who's calling the plays, and I know who to get mad at. They thought like they were tricking people out by both of them looking like they were talking, and then it turned out that Charlie Fry was actually calling the plays. Like that was the craziest shit, and you cannot expect this team to have won football games with that clown show going on.
Now, people wonder why Tua looked like he was struggling his first 2 years.
That he was. So, obviously, this is the list, and we started a new thing of doing a list each week. Brett, this week I'm only going to ask for a top 3. If you want, you can have a minute, or you can get right into it. The top 3 things that surprised you from week 1 in the NFL.
Week 1 in the entire NFL?
Yeah, entire NFL, top 3 things that surprised you.
First one, passing numbers are way down this year. This is, I think, like I showed the stat, like 2 years ago, there was over 60 passing touchdowns. Week 1 this year, there was like 30.
You know what I've noticed also on that note? It seems like, and this is a great thing, that referees are allowing defensive backs to be a lot more physical.
They are, and I think
they're calling blatant pass interference, but the 50-50s that used to just be penalties in years past seemingly have reverted back to being no calls, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. Second thing, got to talk about the new kickoff rules. It's still no one really knows how best to handle it. So that's they don't know people just don't know what to do. You got it. Most teams are just saying, we'll just have you start at the 30. And the final thing, honestly, and this is also just me trying to keep hyping up our own offensive line. The offensive line play in the NFL is bad. like I know I've said it before, but Atlanta, like, and I know they were playing Pittsburgh, but Atlanta has a very highly paid offensive line, and Pittsburgh destroyed them. Pittsburgh's offensive line with some high end guys looked really bad. Seattle had struggles. Like the offensive line issue is a league wide pandemic, basically.
Yeah, and you went league specific, and I'll go team specific, and kind of bounce off it. The first one for me was how flat the Falcons' offense looked. I expected a little more. I know Kirk Cousins is coming back from the injury, but they have a lot of weapons, and I think to only score 10 points and to get shut out in the second half of that game at home, especially after you made the move to not go with a guy like Bill Belichick, and go with Raheem Morris. I think only scoring 10 points in the first half there is almost inexcusable for the Falcons. I think the second thing is going to be a little bit personal, but it was looking at my phone and seeing that the Bears had won that game and not necessarily knowing how they won that game. And then furthermore, looking in and seeing that Caleb Williams, who's my fantasy quarterback in my dynasty league, only had 93 yards of passing. So I think I'm going to start Matthew Stafford next week, which should be my third surprise. But I think the last one I'm going to go with is and I shouldn't be surprised by this. It's going to be a duo. Part of it is Sam Darnold being a competent quarterback for the Vikings. But I think Kevin O'Connell's a great coach, so that's not as surprising. I think for me, it's going to be the Saints scoring 47 points. That team, and yes, the Panthers got absolutely roasted. They looked horrible. Bryce Young looked god awful. But I think
we turn it around, and I'm not just saying that because I picked them to be the surprise team.
No, but I think that you look at Derek Carr played a really efficient football game. Alvin Kamara looked like Alvin Kamara. And defensively, man, Alontae Taylor had 3 sacks. And they got to Bryce Young. They picked off Bryce Young, and they were all over them all day. And that game was over quick. So it's going to be interesting to see as we go into week 2 and the Saints go to Dallas. I don't think that's a game that people expect them to win. But with the momentum, it'll be interesting to see. They have the Cowboys coming up. They have the Eagles coming up. And they could very easily be 1-2 with 2 ugly losses. But it'd be interesting to see if the Saints, after a huge performance, find a way to kind of hang around. Because once they get past Cowboys, Eagles, Falcons, Chiefs, that schedule opens up a bit for them.
Yeah.
And someone's got to win that division.
Yeah. And we're getting to that point. For those who are watching us all, 1,180 of you, 9 o'clock, Jordan's going into enemy territory to talk Bills.
Yeah, I got invited on. It's going to be fun. You know, it's always nice to go on into enemy territory, and I'm interested to see from a Bills perspective what they think about the Dolphins and what they think about their own team. Because we can sit here and talk about the Bills, but going in and talking to 2 guys that talk about the Bills a lot like we talk about the Dolphins, it is going to be very interesting. So when we do get off of here, everybody go bathroom, get a drink, do what you got to do. And at 9, you can find it at Do Champions, DUE Champions. It is their YouTube channel. And I'll be on with Pat and Jake, who asked me to come on and kind of give them an insight of the Dolphins and talk about how they match up with the Bills this coming Thursday. 2 days.
I was just on Third and Teal with Isaiah, who's on Twitter as Duval's Finest. It was a fun time talking. They actually said we're invited anytime to trash AFC East teams because they don't like anybody from those teams, and I'm like, there you go. But
it's a lot of fun, and it's always great. I remember when we first started, reaching out to people and being surprised how many people were so willing to come on and help us, even if there were 10 people in here listening, even if there were 15 people in here listening. And now there's nobody that could ask me to come on to a podcast that I wouldn't do it for them, because this is a community of content creators And whether big or small, it's always great to go around and help others.
Yep. And as I said on the Jags podcast, definitely support small content creators. Dolphin fans, our fan group has a bunch of really good podcasts out there. Even if you don't listen to us, definitely support others. Dive Bar, Sideline T, 3 yards per carry. I know there's more. Those are just the 3 that are off the top of my head, but there's a lot of good podcasts out there to listen to. There are some that I'm sorry, I apologize, guys. There's some that I do listen to. I just don't know the name of the podcast. So I just see it on Twitter.
Brett, what we need to do is we need to, over the course of the next week, I want you to write down every podcast you listen to and say. That way next week when you do this segment, nobody gets offended and you can mention everybody.
That sounds good to me. It's going to be a long list.
Brett, before we get off here, and we're at 50 minutes, and I'm joining the Bills in a half hour, there are over 1,200 people right now, and I'm sure, even though we're a Dolphins podcast, I'm sure the only reason they're here right now is to wonder when you were going to do this hot food challenge that you said you were going to do. And it's now, we've had 1,000 followers on Twitter for a while now, and you still haven't done it. So what's going on?
Just making final plans with Zach to see if we're doing something different. And if not,
it's always final plans. It's always something different. Just eat it. Just get the thing.
I have no problem. Well, first of all, you
no different. Get the thing you said you were going to eat. I don't even, again, you've explained it 100 times. I'm not even sure the full details. Get the thing you said you were going to eat, bring it on the show, eat it, and tear up in front of all these people.
Well, then we'll do it on.
They deserve it.
Then we'll do it
next week. They followed us simply.
We'll do it next week.
Thank you.
We will do it next week.
All you got to do is pressure them a little bit.
Yes.
And it works.
Yep. Before we go, I do want to say something that is personal to my heart. I apologize if I get emotional about it, but September is Suicide Awareness Month. Today is National Suicide Awareness Day. A lot of people don't know this. I lost one of my best friends to suicide. I lost my little cousin to suicide. So this month is very important to me in a lot of ways because I do want to bring awareness to it. So if anybody's having trouble or anybody you know is having trouble, just reach out to them. Make sure you're there for them. And if you are having trouble, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, and we're not licensed or anything like that, but we talk football, we talk other stuff, but at the end of the day, we're human, and we are a sounding board or just a voice. Our DMs are open, both of ours personally and the show. Send us a message if you just want to have a conversation. If there's anything you ever need, reach out, and you have 2 people here that are always willing to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good place to stop, Brett. Do you have anything else to plug before we get off here?
Anything to plug? Nope. Just remember, everybody, the game is on Prime. So make sure you got that. If it's not yours, you got someone else's, and you get the app rolling and get ready to squish the Bills this Thursday.
Yep. Again, in a half hour at 9 p.m. Eastern, go over to Do Champions, their Buffalo Bills podcast, and you'll see me on there. But for Brett, for Mr. S, for Zach. Brett, do we still do music? Is that still something we do at the beginning of the end?
It gets added post.
So we do have music. So if I say hit that music, and when somebody listens to this on one of our streaming platforms, they'll hear music?
They will.
All right, then we'll start this over for Brett, for Mr. S, for Zach, for Donovan, for whoever else is working in the back. I'm Jordan. Zach, go ahead and post-edit that music.